Hello everyone, Martin here, back with another Doomsday video. This time I'm back with part 2 of my Doomsday fundamentals, the Doomsday tutorial that I decided to make. Seemed like people enjoyed the first one, so really happy about that. Thanks so much for the kind comments and stuff. So today I'm going to be talking about heuristics, and in particular I want to talk about what you need to be identifying if you're gold fishing and want to win on the same turn. Um, Sometimes this can happen on turn one. Quite often it can happen on turn two or turn three. Obviously, if you need to be protected when you do this, it's harder. But so the heuristics here is that you'll be counting mana, you'll be counting cards in hand, and you'll be counting draws. By draws I mean like the ability to draw cards. And so, what do you need? Well, you need the following. You need 4 mana. You have to have access to 3 black mana and 1 blue mana. So that's the mana. Then you need a brainstorm plus an additional card in hand. We can call that card blank because it doesn't matter what it is. This is post Doomsday. So after you've spent your 3 black mana to cast Doomsday and it has resolved, you now need access to 1 blue mana, the brainstorm plus 1 plus the blank. And then brainstorm automatically is the draw card here. So 2 cards, one of them being brainstorm. Okay, so how does this work? Well, imagine these are the 7 cards in your hand. These 5 are the important ones. I suppose we could switch the sea and the island, doesn't matter. But so basically, what you do is you play out your underground sea, you tap it to cast Dark Ritual. So Dark Ritual goes into your graveyard. You have 3 black mana floating. You cast Doomsday. Alright, so now Doomsday has resolved. This is your hand. Sorry, no. This underground sea is in play. These 4 cards is your hand. So you build this pile, and I'm going to stack it, the bottom card being the furthest to the top, sort of counterintuitively here, but bear with me. So you make it Thassa's Oracle on the bottom with a cycler on top. Be careful about managing cyclers here, because you'll be needing 2 cyclers, and you only have 1 land, so you cannot put 2 Edge of Autumn. We have the Edge of Autumn down here, but we are going to need an Edge of Autumn, so I'm just going to put that here for now. So being the pile being what it is right now, it doesn't really matter with what the last 3 cards are, because we're not going to draw them all 3 with a brainstorm. So the second cycler, the Lion's Eye Diamond, and then consider. Okay. So what happens? Well, we cast our brainstorm. Sorry, we cast our lotus petal, make a blue mana. That's the blue mana we needed. Then we cast the brainstorm. Our hand is personal tutor and island. But as you'll notice, if we could lose one of these cards, we could have mulliganed to 6, for instance, and it would still work. So we draw, consider, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Edge of Autumn. And in play, remember, is the tapped Underground Sea. So we put back the blank from our hand. Let's say it's the basic island here, and then consider on top. This is our deck. Consider is the top card. Thassa's Oracle is the bottom card. Okay, so now we play our Lion's Eye Diamond. We cycle Edge of Autumn by sacrificing the Underground Sea. Maintaining priority, we crack LED for 3 blue mana. So, personal tutor, the last card in our hand goes to the graveyard. We are now hellbent with the draw a card trigger from cycling on the stack. So now we draw consider. We have 3 blue mana in the pool. We use 1 blue mana, cast consider, have a look at the island. We put it in the graveyard, and we draw Street Wraith. 2 blue mana in the pool. We cycle the Street Wraith, draw the Thassa. The deck is now empty, so removal on Thassa doesn't work, and we play Thassa and we win. And that is basically the most sort of archetypical way to do it. Now, I'm going to show you how we can substitute the different components in the hand and still have this work. Okay, so here I have basically swapped the opening hand. I've swapped a lotus petal for an edge of autumn. So basically, the exact same thing is going to happen here with one small change, which is that we don't have access to the blue mana in our hand, but we have access to a cycler, so we can substitute the lotus petal with a cycler, and then we just do the same thing. We play the Underground Sea, cast Dark Ritual, cast Doomsday. We make this pile instead. Now with the lotus petal as the top card, we've basically one for one swapped these two cards. We cycle the edge, sacking the Underground Sea, draw a lotus petal, tap, sack for blue, cast the Brainstorm, draw, consider, draw, Lineside Diamond, draw Street Wraith, put back the blank in our hand, and consider. Now play Lineside Diamond, cycle Street Wraith maintaining priority, sack Lineside Diamond for trip blue, draw consider, cast consider, 2 blue floating, put island in the graveyard, and draw Thassa. Same thing, right? Okay, so same thing here, but now we see that in our opening hand there isn't a Brainstorm. But there is the 3 black off of the Underground Sea, the Doomsday, and a second blue, a second initial mana source here, so blue mana, and then the cycler. So again, we've swapped Brainstorm with a cycler. So I'm sure you're getting the point here, but very, very simply, play the Doomsday, play the petal, make blue, sack the island to cycle edge. We have blue floating, we draw Brainstorm, cast Brainstorm, no mana floating, draw these 3, put back blank plus consider, and basically it's rinse and repeat. Put island in the graveyard and draw Thassa and play her. So that is sort of the most routine line to know. You're gonna win with iterations of this a lot of the time. It doesn't always happen on turn 1 at all. It can happen on turn 2 like a lot more often, because then you don't need the lotus petal. You could just I say it still like takes a lot of components, but you could have a hand that had like I don't know, like these 5 cards and then just 1 blank on like wins on turn 2 in the same manner. So it is a fairly low resource win. Obviously it's unprotected, but we could start like throwing in protection spells into this, right? Like imagine you had this hand. This hand is a turn 1 win that is protected, at least when people fight over Doomsday, and a lot of the time there's a really interesting dynamic going on, I think, between Doomsday players and opponents with counter spells, because basically it's almost like a catch-22 of sorts. Maybe that's not completely the correct way to use that that term, but bear with me. But like if you're the Doomsday player, you put Doomsday on the stack and you're up against like a control opponent. They have a counterspell. Now, they can choose, like, let's say it's Force of Will. They can choose to force the Doomsday, or they could choose to let Doomsday resolve and then force the Thassa's Oracle, right? But everyone knows that Doomsday plays Cavern of Souls. So, if you let Doomsday resolve and they just pass the turn and you can't, like, win on your subsequent turn or disrupt them meaningfully, then these two best friends are just going to show up in 1 or 2 turns and you're powerless to stop them, right? Well, so that leads a lot of control players to fight over the Doomsday, because it is costing the Doomsday player resources. It's almost always like at least 2 cards. Sometimes it's 3 if you don't have a land but have a petal. So that's usually like an exchange a control player is happy to like offer up. Like if it's worse for the Doomsday pilot to be down a lot of cards than the control pilot a lot of the time, because we need a sequence of cards, whereas like they have individual cards that probably can work for them more of the time. But so that leads a lot of control layer players to fight over the Doomsday, and most of the time you can then reasonably expect that if your Doomsday resolved, at least in game one, where there aren't like they don't have additional like cards that help them, like dress down and endurance and stuff, you can reasonably expect that they don't have anything else, right? So that is all just to say that if we go turn one on, let's say on the play, or maybe even on the draw, but our opponent has cast a spell on turn one, so they're tapped out. So the daze is live. So let's say we go Underground Sea, tap it, cast Dark Ritual, cast Doomsday. Now they force of will. Well, let's say we daze. So daze is in the graveyard, Underground Sea is back in our hand. If it now resolves, I think I would 9 out of 10 times, or maybe even like I don't know, 59, 59 out of 60 times or whatever, I would probably just go for the win now. We have the Brainstorm, we have the blue mana, we have the spare card in hand. If the opponent has been sandbagging a counterspell or a piece of interaction, obviously you lose, but I would say from experience, like, you almost never lose from there if they have, like, say they forced and you dazed. Now, if my opponent has, if I'm on the play and I have this hand, I probably go for it in the dark. I don't know, maybe I don't. It depends. If my opponent goes like blue fetch land, crack, get a basic island, cast ponder, for instance, then I would go for it with the day's backup. Without the day's backup, I don't think I jam there. But yeah, it's hard. It's sort of a question of temperament as well. I'm going to show you like a really cool thing here. Let's say that you've mulliganed to 6 here, right? And you would say, okay, well, I cast the Underground Sea. I have to cast the Petal as well if I want to make the blue mana. And then you go Dark Ritual Doomsday. Well, if they fight over your Doomsday here, because you have Daze as protection, it's not going to cost you the card, because Daze pretty much swaps places in your hand with the Underground Sea. So let's say they force, you cast Daze, but you return an island. So now you still have the blank card to go with your Brainstorm and actually win, which is really neat. Okay, I just want to show you another way that this can be done. There are several other ways, but before Consider was printed, and even after that for a while, and even today still, some players prefer to play a copy of Ideas Unbound. This is a really awesome and weird Kamigawa sorcery that lets you draw 3 cards for 2 mana, which is obviously an insane effect. But at the end of your next end step, you have to discard 3 cards. So it is like it's like an expensive, well, expensive and more powerful looting, except you don't loot right away. But if you don't use the cards, you lose them at the end of the turn. So it's sort of it's card negative in that sense. But anyways, so the way this works, the setup is the exact same. You need 3 black mana and 1 blue mana. Then you need a Brainstorm and 1 card in hand. And again, we can substitute the Brainstorm or the blue mana with cyclers. So you build this pile here again, Lotus Petal being the bottom card. And in this case, it doesn't really matter which of these 3 cards is the top card, because we'll draw them with Brainstorm. So you go the Sea, the Dark Ritual, the Doomsday, like we've practiced, and then you go Lotus Petal, crack for blue, cast Brainstorm. 2 cards in hand, it stays an island, and we draw these 3. And then you put back the blank card in your hand. We had 2 in this case, but there you go. And you put back Ideas Unbound. So the deck is now 4 cards big. It has Ideas Unbound on top. So we play Lionside Island, and we cycle Street Wraith, sacking Lines of Diamond in response for blue. We draw the Ideas Unbound, 3 blue mana floating. Use 2 of those 3 to cast Ideas Unbound, draw the rest of your deck. You have 1 blue in the pool, you play your Lotus Petal, and you play Thassa, and you win. And sometimes back in the day we would play a copy of Pact of Negation. I haven't played that card in a while myself, and I don't see that many play it anymore. But obviously, if you had an extra mana from the get-go, you could replace Lotus Petal with something else. That could be a Pact of Negation. It can also, in this case, be a Daze if you have the island here. But most of the time, by the time you get to this point, like, most opponents won't have interaction. They will have used it before, when Doomsday was put on the stack, vis-a-vis the former point I was trying to make. Okay, one last thing I want to touch on in this video is the win on the same turn versus pass the turn sort of dichotomy. Pass the turn is often abbreviated PTT, just in case you come upon that when people are talking in writing about Doomsday. A lot of the time they'll write PTT for pass the turn. And I will say that, like, it's a multitude of factors that plays in. What usually is, or at least a non-trivial amount of time, is sort of a significant difference. Is when you pass the turn, you'll get to include Cavern of Souls, throw that into the mix. Like, for instance, let's say that you pass the turn, you resolve Doomsday, you don't have any mana floating, but let's say you have like a Street Wraith in your hand. Let's say your hand is just the Street Wraith now. Doomsday has resolved, and you get to build your pile. Well, if you make your pile, and let's say for the argument's sake we have a land in play, so Street Wraith in hand, land in play, Underground Sea. So now we build the pile to have Thassa's Oracle and Cavern of Souls as the bottom 2 cards, but we need, in this setup here, we probably want Cavern of Souls above the the Thassa. I'll get into why. And we put a cycler, and then we put, let's say our life total is a little bit precious to us, then we put 2 more cyclers, but make them both Edge of Autumn. Okay, so now we pass the turn, we hopefully don't die, and hopefully don't get our Underground Sea wastelanded. So now we draw for our first draw step, our new turn, we draw the Edge of Autumn. So we cycle the Street Wraith, we draw a second Edge of Autumn. This is our hand, remember? We tap the Underground Sea for blue and sacrifice it to cycle Edge of Autumn. In our hand, we draw Street Wraith. We cycle Street Wraith, paying 2 life, draw Cavern of Souls, play it. Remember, we have the blue mana floating from the sea. Now we name Merfolk or Wizard. We tap a blue mana, and then we sack that, and we draw Thassa with 2 blue mana floating, one of them being a Cavern of Souls mana, and now we have an uncounterable Thassa's Oracle. So that's just one example of how, like, Cavern of Souls can be excellent, and also an example of how, like, if the opponent is sitting now with like a fistful of Force of Wills or Pyroblasts, it doesn't matter. That is, like, a Cavern of Souls is just an insanely powerful effect to have access to. Okay, now there are just a lot of different ways this can be set up. Now, if you have access to, let's say, if you ever can make Doomsday and have 2 cyclers in hand, but no blue mana and no Brainstorm, then you still get to win, because you can set up the top 2 cards of your Doomsday pile to be Lines of Diamond plus something that draws cards, and you'll figure it out from there. It can be like just cyclers or whatever. But yeah, no, going back to the pass the turn or try to win now, I think, like, a lot of the time it will just sort of bear itself out. You will be sitting on insufficient resources to execute the same turn win, and then it becomes a question of, do I put Doomsday on the stack now and build a pile that will win either next turn or the turn after that? Or is it more advantageous to me to pass the turn right now without putting Doomsday on the stack and hope that my next draw step is going to give me the resources I'm missing. And that's going to be super context dependent. Like, what kind of pressure is your opponent putting you on? It can either be overt pressure, like creatures on the board that are threatening your life total, or it can be more sort of nefarious, where it's like, well, my opponent just played their third basic island and cast their like fourth cantrip of this game. So maybe if I give them one more turn, I'm just gonna get like comboed out. I mean, yeah, like I said, in some cases it'll just bear itself out. Like if you if you're at, I don't know, like 12 life and your opponent has two flip delvers, obviously you can't Doomsday and pass a turn because you'll die. So you'll have to just wait and hope that the next turn is going to give you what you needed. But sometimes it'll be less obvious, and you'll need to try and work it out what you're more comfortable with, and try to like play the odds a little bit, and that'll come with experience where you'll start to familiarize yourself with the like the threats of the format. Like, are you more likely to lose to a wasteland if you make the pass a turn pile right now that loses to either wasteland or lightning bolt, and like you can build the pile to play around one but not the other? Or is it just better to wait entirely and try to go for it all in one go? I think also, like, especially in control matchups, winning on the same turn is rarely, at least for me, and maybe that's also something to do with my playstyle. And I'm not saying it's correct, but like I often prefer to not just YOLO it. The problem with winning on the same turn, you see, is often the card lines that I'm in. Now, in game one, like we've gone through, if your opponent lets Doomsday resolve, or especially if they try to fight over Doomsday and lose, and you can win from there, it's usually safe. But in post-board games, like let's say let's say you go Dark Ritual Doomsday and you have the Lotus Petal and it just resolves, but they have like an uncracked blue fetch land. It's not unlikely, let's say that they are sitting on a Pyroblast that doesn't have it hasn't had a target yet. But if you could just go for it here with lines at Diamond, you're going to lose your whole hand and then put Thassa on the stack, so it's unprotected completely. And then you lose to a single Pyroblast. Or they're like an endurance deck, and we need to beat that. So how do we do that? That sort of thing. So I think a lot of the times the problem with winning on the same turn is that the card lines that I'm in is required, and it costs you your hand, so you can't very easily keep up protection. There are ways where you can end up with a card in your hand that like protects you, but it requires like multiple cyclers in your hand or whatever when you're going off. At least with this setup here without Ideas Unbound. With Ideas Unbound is a little bit different, but still, like, they'll just pyroblast the Ideas Unbound, and then you're kind of stuck there. I don't know. Okay, so I think that's going to be it for this second part of the Doomsday tutorial series. Next time, which may be the last in the series, I'm not sure. It depends on how much different content I think there really is to sort of squeeze out of this. But I will have one more episode at least. And it's going to be about the strengths and the weaknesses of the deck, in the scope of the Legacy format. And I think I'll probably also touch on the sideboard. I'm not going to make like a sideboard guide or anything, but I will talk about maybe sideboard heuristics. And depending on the strengths and weaknesses aspect of the thing, that may or may not end up being its own video. But for now, that's it. I hope this was useful to someone. Hopefully, a lot of you. Please, as always, feel free to drop comments, all that good stuff. And yeah, I'll be back with some more Legacy. Bye bye.